Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Chris will probably have to run down there and run up there and turn down this microphone because I tend to talk loud. Thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. I'm honored to be with you. I'm more honored to be the President and Chief Executive Officer at the Gettysburg Foundation, the Parks partner, and all the great board members, volunteers, and staff members that we have working to help you and the staff members of the park to help preserve and educate people about this great place. So thanks for being here this afternoon. I want to thank all those watching at home for joining us. And I'm going to spend a little time with you all today talking about one of my favorite stories related to the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, some of you know I got interested in the American Civil War because my dad used to read to me a set of diaries of a Union soldier in the 62nd Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment, which was a regiment right behind the 54th Massachusetts, killed at Morris Island, South Carolina. And the soldier that my dad would read to me was killed in action in the war, and my dad would read me entries from his diary. And that's how I got interested in the Civil War, because of an artifact, and what always got me interested in stories. So I love stories. And this one is a great story. We're an equal opportunity employer here at the Gettysburg Foundation. So we've got a Union story and a Confederate story that really come together. Now this story, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about it, I came about it many years ago, and I can't remember, I'm trying to remember, when did Wayne actually start to know about this story, and I can't remember that. But I've had a lot of help in my career. I cannot tell you the number of people. We could not fill both auditoriums with everyone that has helped me on my career to where I am now. And as a young historian, over 30 years ago, I met and befriended an Army colonel who worked at the Military History Institute, which is now the Army Heritage and Education Center up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And he has been a supporter and a mentor to me for my entire career, and a friend of mine, and he happens to be the brigade historian for the Texas Brigade Reactivated, which is the group of descendants for Hood's Texas Brigade. So in honor of him, I would like to dedicate this program today to him. And he's in the audience. I'm not sure where he is, but we're going to track him down. And this is him and me at the Texas Brigade Monument at Gaines Mill. So in honor of Colonel Iserman, the historian for Texas Brigade Reactivated, Rick, this story is in honor of you today, and of course, the struggle of the Union and Confederate soldiers that fought in the battles that we're going to talk about today, in memory of all of them. So this monument was put on the Gaines Mill battlefield. Rick's group, the Texas Brigade Reactivated group, the Richmond National Battlefield Site, the Texas Historical Association, these three groups helped to put this monument, which looks like our Texas Brigade monument here at Gettysburg, on the battlefield at Gaines Mill on the peninsula in 2012. So this is a 2012 monument that's here. So let's talk a little bit about the origins of the story I'm going to tell you. First of all, it starts in a Confederate Veteran, which was a magazine published after the American Civil War in Tennessee in 1896, in volume 4. This is an article by a lady named Sue Monroe that talks about the two principal characters that we're going to talk about today. And we can verify much of this story. It started because of a Texan, a man by the name of Polly, J.B. Polly. Polly was a member of Company F of the 4th Texas Infantry Regiment, and he published a book after the American Civil War at the turn of the century called Letters to Charming Nellie. And he, in Confederate Veteran, is a contributing editor. So this is a magazine that veterans write into, talk about their experiences, and then other veterans write back and say, you know what, you're all wrong. You didn't see it the way I saw it. We know how the veterans are. Well, Sue Monroe, who's up at the top of this, was from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and she goes on to relate a story between a Union colonel and a Union captain, excuse me, and a Confederate colonel. And this would be the gist of the story. So, what is the gist of the story? The gist of the story is Colonel Benjamin Carter of the 4th Texas Infantry Regiment fought at the Battle of Gaines Mill and at the Battle of Second Manassas. And in these two battles, his regiment, the 4th Texas Infantry, went up against the same Pennsylvania battery. What are the odds that that would happen on two battlefields? And that battery was Battery G, 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery, under the command of a Union captain named Captain Mark Kearns. And Kearns was killed in action by Benjamin Carter's troops, the 4th Texas. He was buried by the Texans. Colonel Carter used his coat to have the body wrapped in. And then in the Battle of Gettysburg, Benjamin Carter is mortally wounded here on July 2nd. He is taken to a farm west of Gettysburg, and then he is taken to a school in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, where he is nursed by the mother and stepfather of the man he killed, Mark Kearns. Okay? That's the gist of the story that we're going to talk about today. And we can confirm a lot of what's being said here by Sue Monroe, mentioned from J.B. Polly, a member of the Texas Brigade, and what are the particulars of this particular story. It's a fascinating story, everybody, from the Civil War. And so let's talk a little bit about our two principal players. Who are the two men that we're going to talk about that make up this story? One of them is Captain Mark Kearns. Now, I've looked high and low. I just told some folks up front here, I've never found a picture of Captain Mark Kearns. Someday, there's going to be one out there, and Wayne Motts is going to track it down. It's got to be somewhere, maybe within members of his family. But Mark Kearns was born in Bedford, Pennsylvania. His father was a carpenter there, but his father died when Mark Kearns was only 2 years old. And then his widowed mother ended up in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. This is where Mark Kearns actually grew up. His widowed mother married a Reformed minister who will come into our story, named Samuel Fisher. And Kearns will spend a couple years at the Chambersburg Academy School, which is on 3rd and Queen Street in Chambersburg today. There is a building there today that is now being turned into luxury apartments. I believe it used to be an old school. It's been repurposed several times, and the original building for the Chambersburg Academy, where Mark Kearns attended school, is inside the modern structure that is now being redone. He started in 1853 and entered into the sophomore, or I guess junior class, at Franklin and Marshall College. Franklin and Marshall College is a Reformed college. This is why he went there, because his stepfather is a Reformed minister. This is the connection to the college. He graduates in 1855, and I don't know why he goes to Council Bluffs, Iowa, but that's where he decides he's going to go. And he goes into real estate and farming in Boonville, Cooper County, Missouri. This is on the Missouri River. I have no idea why Mark Kearns ended up there, but I can tell you when he was killed at 2nd Manassas, he still had property in the state of Missouri, and we'll talk a little bit about it. He comes back to Pennsylvania, and since he is a college graduate and college educated, he gets a commission as a 2nd lieutenant in Battery G of the 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery, which is actually recruited in Schuylkill County, and then it's organized in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, it has men from other counties in Pennsylvania, but that's principally where it comes from. And very shortly after he joins the unit, he is promoted to be full captain after the resignation of the captain that's there. So on the Virginia Peninsula and at the Battle of 2nd Manassas, he will be the captain in charge of Battery G of the 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery. He'll be wounded in action at the Battle of Gaines Mill. That should be 1861, or 1862, not 1861. All spelling errors are mine, by the way, everyone that's here. And he must have been an outstanding commander. He was a very brave man. We'll talk a little bit more about that on these battlefields. But apparently, he was not very good at giving speeches. So Kearns is a man you want to have next to you when you've got to fight a battle. He's not a man, at least according to the Lancaster newspaper, that you want to have around when you're giving a speech. You got to love this. This is his senior class speech, The Republic in Peril by Mark Kearns of Chambersburg. The matter in this gentleman's oration may have been very good, but on the account of the manner in which he mouthed it in delivery, 9 out of 10 persons in the hall were prevented from understanding it. Nature never intended Mr. Kearns for an order. This is what you find when you got digitized newspapers. You know, you could find some things. So Anyway, Kearns will get command of Battery G, and it will be his Union artillery battery that the Texans will face both at the Gaines Mill battlefield and the battlefield at 2nd Manassas. And you may hear me use both names since we're an equal opportunity employer here today. You may hear me say Bull Run, you may hear me say Manassas, back and forth on the battlefield. Let's talk about Benjamin Carter. This is the second person in our story. This is a beautiful photograph of Colonel Carter, and it's from the Austin History Center when he was, guess what, mayor of Austin, Texas. He was the actual mayor of Austin, Texas. That's where the photograph comes from. He's born in 1831. We do not know the exact birth date of Captain Kearns, and we do not know the exact birth date of Colonel Carter. It's interesting. We know the year, but we don't know the exact date of birth. So at Gettysburg, Colonel Carter will be 32 years old. He is a native from the state of Tennessee, and in 1850, after he graduates from Columbia, Tennessee, the Jackson College there, he will be a teacher. And I got some records recently from the Freemasons. He's an active Freemason. And they told me in Tennessee that he joins the Masonic Lodge in May through July of 1853. So sometime between July of 1853 and the first time I can find him in the newspaper in Austin, Texas, in 1854, he will move from Tennessee to Austin, Texas. Now, why does he go to Austin, Texas? Wayne Motts doesn't know. Doesn't know why he has a connection there. I looked at the 1860 census. They've got more than 20 lawyers there. He wants to study law, and he becomes a lawyer in Austin, Texas. He also becomes the Austin city attorney there and will enter Confederate service in 1861. He'll be married in 1856. He will have 3 children. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And he will go off to war in the fall, or actually summertime, and fall of 1861, never to return there. Now, I went to Texas, and we're pulling off some things that I'd like to do some research on. And one of the first things that I was able to find out is where did Benjamin Carter, where did he work, what did he attend? And so we did find, or I found, thanks to the records of the Masonic Lodge, where he became a Mason, and as I told you, he was an active Freemason in Tennessee. He transferred his membership to Austin, Texas, and I found the actual building that the Masons met in downtown Austin, Texas. It is still there. It's in the middle of skyscrapers. The day I was there, I had to ask the construction crew whether I could actually get on the porch to photograph the building. Look at everything sitting on the outside of the building. It is still there in downtown Texas, and this would have been the place that he would have been in the late 1850s, Austin Lodge number 12, Free and Accepted Masons that he was the head of. And then he will be in a building that the Masons use later on in downtown, and this was an advertisement. I know it's very poorly shown for you to read, but this is an advertisement of the Red Brick Store, the Phelps and Johnson store. It didn't help, by the way, that they decided that they were going to rename all the streets in Austin, Texas, when you're a guy like me and you're trying to find the name of the streets. They decided they rename everything. So Bose to Ark Street is now 7th Street. If you don't know that, you're not going to find it in downtown Austin. Lucky the folks at the Austin History Center could help me. But this is where the Masons met during the Civil War, and it's where they met on the eve of the Civil War. And what's fascinating about this, it says the Red Brick Store at the corner of Bose to Ark and Congress Street. Well, let's look at the advertisement. This is a poor vision out of the paper, a poor image out of the paper, but let's take a look at it. This is the partner that Benjamin Carter had in the law office in Austin, Texas. Look what it says. Office in the Red Brick Building, corner of Bose to Ark Street and Congress Avenue. So the same place the Masons met in downtown Austin, Texas prior to the Civil War is the same place that Colonel Carter actually had his law office. And what I'd really like to know, since he was the head of the Masonic Lodge, how did that relationship happen? Did he happen to get his office because the head of the Masonic Lodge was there, or was it vice versa? And Wayne doesn't know. So what do you do when you're in downtown Austin, Texas? You want to find out what the heck did this thing look like and what is sitting there today. Here is a photograph that shows the 3-story Phelps and Johnson store in 1858. In the 1880s, it's Harbor Brothers store. Right here, that is the original building that Colonel Benjamin Carter, the 4th Texas, had his law practice in, and it's the original building that he went to Masonic meetings in downtown Austin, Texas. And what is there today? There you go. That's what it looks like today. The contemporary Austin Jones Center set on this corner is where the building was, and the original building isn't there anymore. But with enough luck, folks, you can find these locations today that are here. So Carter has a successful law practice in downtown Austin. He's married in 1856, and when he goes off to the American Civil War, he's got 3 children. Civil War comes, obviously, if you're in Texas, you're going to leave the Union in February of 1861. The first shots at Fort Sumter are fired in April, and Carter, being a very prominent attorney in downtown Austin, will form his own company, the Austin City Light Infantry. It will become the Tom Green Rifles. Tom Green became a Confederate general during the American Civil War. He was killed in the Western Theater of Operations, and this will become Company B of the 4th Texas. Carter is the first captain of that company, will be the company he will lead off to war. It'll be the company that will be with him when he's killed at Second Manassas, or when he fights at Second Manassas as the major of the unit later on. Then he becomes colonel here in the Battle of Gettysburg. He'll be the lieutenant colonel of the unit here in the Battle of Gettysburg. I think everybody knows Hood's Texas Brigade, one of the most famous regiments, or units, I should say, one of the most famous organizations as a brigade, composed of several regiments during the war, and the Texans are only part of it. My friend here in the room, he'd probably say the Texans are the only part that matter. If you're in the 3rd Arkansas, you certainly would not have that opinion. But this brigade is formed really in the fall of 1861. Now, I went to Austin. This monument was put up in 1910. It is right where the State House is. And fascinating what it says on the monument. Hood's Texas Brigade shall retain its original formation as long as there's a man left to wave its flag. And that was said by President Jefferson Davis, that he would keep the Texas Brigade intact for as long as there was a man that could wave its flag. And it was. During the American Civil War, according to the Texas State Association, Historical Association, over 4,000 men served in this brigade. Now that would include the 3 Texas regiments, the 1st, the 4th, and the 5th Texas, would later include the 3rd Arkansas. And part of the brigade also included Hampton's Legion, a part of the infantry unit for Wade Hampton, and it also included the 18th Georgia. Now, these units were later transferred out. So the Texas Brigade that you all know in the Battle of Gettysburg, commanded by Jerome Robertson, has the 1st, the 4th, 5th Texas, 3rd Arkansas. That's here. During the war, this brigade suffered about 61% casualties during the war. About 600 of these men, according to the Texas State Historical Association, surrendered at Appomattox. These are the units that fight in the Eastern Army, the Army of Potomac. There are many Texas units that don't fight, of course, with Robert E. Lee, but the 3 that do in the infantry are the 3 that are part of Hood's Texas Brigade. And John Bell Hood is not the first commander of the Texas Brigade. Louis Wigfall, who governor of Texas, is the first commander. Then Hood will come charge, and Jerome Robertson, that you all know here in the Battle of Gettysburg, once General Hood is promoted. So these are all units that they're going to be organized. They'll go from Texas to Richmond, Virginia in the fall of 1861. Val Giles, who was a member of Company B of the 4th Texas, that is Colonel Carter's command. He says, with the coming of the war, he, this is Carter, organized a company called the Tom Green Rifles. It ultimately became Company B of the 4th Texas. Of the original 10 captains who went to war with the 4th Texas in 1861, 6 of them were lawyers. 2 were merchants, 1 was a farmer, and 1 was a stockman. Of the 30 lieutenants, nearly 1/3 were lawyers. Even among the lawyer soldiers in the 4th Texas, according to Val Giles, this is from him, Carter stood out. Captain B.F. Carter of Company B was far above the average of men as you meet them. Intellectually, he had no superior in the regiments a fine lawyer, a natural-born soldier. He was a strict disciplinarian, but practical and just in all things. He possessed the gift of knowing how to explain every maneuver set down in Hardee's tactics so thoroughly that the biggest blockhead in the ranks could understand them. Physically, he was not strong, and the long marches used to weary him very much. On those occasions, to help him along, the boys would divide up his luggage, one taking his sword and belt, the other his haversack and canteen, and another a blanket, and so forth. By this means, we managed to keep him up. So he's getting help. He's getting help here, but there's no question that he is well respected by the troops of the 4th Texas, of the men of the brigade. And this is, once again, this unit goes off to war, goes off to Richmond, Virginia, and is organized. Now, Carter's married. I just mentioned that to you. He's got 3 children. So what happens? Well, 2 of his children and his wife all die within about a 6-month period. Okay? These are the original records. They've never been published. You're seeing him here for the first time of Carter's family from the cemetery that they are buried in, and this is from the Austin History Center. So this child, and it does not even give the name of the child, son of B.F. Carter of congestion of the brain, aged 18 months, and then this is a child that one there says son, this one just has child, 4 years old, of diphtheria. And then in December of 1861, his wife dies, and she's only 24 years old when she dies. And according to the burial record, it says that she dies of a spinal affection, which I assume is affliction, is what they wanted to say there. It could be meningitis. Don't know that, but that's what it could be. That's here. But her date of death, and the date of death that's on her tombstone is incorrect. She died December 12, 1861. It's confirmed in the burial records of the cemetery, and it's confirmed in the newspaper. Her death, Louisa Carter, they had been married since 1856. And so of the 3 children that Colonel Carter has when he goes off to war, ladies and gentlemen, he goes off to war, only one of them will survive. He has a daughter that survives. She dies much later on. But, you know, he's got this is a lot of tragedy for a person. Now remember, at the same time, you've got Captain Carter, who's a member of Battery G, 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery, that is becoming a member of Fitz-John Porter's Corps. He's going to end up on the peninsula. 4th Texas is going to be formed with the Texas Brigade outside Richmond. They're going to go down and face against McClellan's army as part of Robert E. Lee's army, the Army of Northern Virginia. And that's going to place the 2 of them together in the 7 days battles, which start June 25th, 1862, and last till July 1st, 1862. And the biggest of those battles on the peninsula is the Battle of Gaines Mill that is fought the 27th of June in 1862. And in that battle, Carter, with the 4th Texas, is going to go right up against Battery G, 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery, and Carter in Kearns. The troops are going to run into each other. Let's take a look at what that is. Now, remember, George McClellan gets to like 4 miles outside Richmond. He's right outside Richmond. Joe Johnston is wounded. Robert E. Lee's put in command on June 1st, 1862, and now Robert E. Lee's got to look for an alternative. How are we going to drive back all the Union soldiers that are outside our capital? Now, here's Richmond. This is the Sarah and Hugh Watt farm. It says C. Watt on this map, and you got Bosun's Creek, and you also have the Chickahominy River, which is right over here. And on the peninsula, the 5th Union Army Corps is north of that river, right over here. And Robert E. Lee sees an opportunity where he can attack Fitz-John Porter's troops that are there and drive them off of the field. As I mentioned, this is the largest battle of the 7 days. It probably has 60,000 Union troops 60,000 for Lee, 60,000 troops for Robert E. Lee, and about 34,000 once reinforced for Porter's men north of the Chickahominy River. So the Confederates outnumbered the Union Army by a very wide margin here. The battle starts very late in the day, about 2:30 in the afternoon, and it will not be until right before sunset that Robert E. Lee will launch attacks, which will include the 4th Texas and 18th Georgia, against part of Porter's line right over here by the Watt House. Now, believe it or not, a decade ago, none of the area around that part of the battlefield was preserved until the American Battlefield Trust helped to acquire over 285 acres that you can now walk a 1.7-mile trail. That photograph of Rick and I that we just showed you is where the Texans came down, right near where the creek was. Today, over a decade ago, that wasn't preserved. So it's just been relatively recently preserved. Here's a picture of the Watt House today. This was at one time Porter's headquarters for a short time, and it also was the location for the artillery batteries right behind or on the high hills of near where the house is. This is American Battlefield Trust map. The Chickahominy is over here. Here's Bosun's Creek, and you've got now where the Texans are, Hampton's Legion, 5th Texas, 1st Texas. You've got the Watt House I just showed you the photograph of, and behind it on this little high hill. And believe me today, folks, this is private ground. So you can walk up here to the White House. The border between this and private ground, you can't go back here where you're on private ground where this is today. But Mark Kearns' battery had 6 pieces of artillery there. And right at sunset, the Confederates will launch a massive attack against where this position actually is. And the Confederates are going to end up taking some very, very heavy losses in the middle of this. Let's come back here and take a look. Whoop, no, let's go here. So Kearns' soldiers are attacked. The Confederates overrun it. Truman Seymour, who's in charge of the Pennsylvania Reserves here, commanding the 3rd Division, says this in his official report. Captain Kearns was wounded early in the battle. This would be at sunset on June 27, 1862. Was wounded early in the battle, but in spite of his injury, kept the field, and when the enemy came down thickly upon his battery, he loaded and fired the last shots himself and brought 4 guns off the battlefield. Texans overran. They took like 14 guns in this assault, and 2 of these guns are going to come from this battery right here. Meanwhile, Kearns is shot in the leg during this and remains on the field. And then he will go back for about a month to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, to recover from his wound. Carter's troops are the ones that are going to end up taking these pieces. So they're facing these guns twice on 2 different places. They're going to face the same 4 guns that Carter has left on the that Kearns has left on the 2nd Manassas battlefield. So it's pretty ironic that you've got Benjamin Carter, the 4th Texas, Mark Kearns, and 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery, and they're together on both of these battlefields. Now, I went to Chambersburg. Of course, I've been over there several times. But what's interesting is, it filed in the courthouse at Chambersburg, Mark Kearns decided when he was home on leave after he shot in the leg at Gaines Mill in July of 1862, before he goes back to the Army, to make out his will. Probably a good time to make out your will, right? And here is a copy of the filed will of Mark Kearns from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. And I kind of boxed this in because, first of all, we know from this will, ladies and gentlemen, that Captain Kearns, our Union commander here, was never married. He leaves everything to his mother. Some accounts have him being married. He's not, and I don't think he ever was married. But it says, which is interesting, that his property and estate in the state of Missouri, his crops, his stock that's there, farm, plantation, all of my property, of whatever kind or description in the state of Pennsylvania or elsewhere, real estate or mixed, in possession. So this all goes to his mother. There's his mother's name, Naomi Fisher, right there. He's got property in Chambersburg, it appears. May not be land property. He's got some sort of land property out of Missouri, and this will is actually filed in Bedford County, Pennsylvania as well. So this will can be found in 3 different places. And he makes it out on July 28, wounded in the leg on June 27th. He makes it out July 28, 1862. In 32 days, he's dead. 32 days. So when you think about it, yeah, this is a time, I'm sure a lot's going through his head when he's thinking about that. So Mark Kearns rejoins his unit, which is part of John Reynolds' Pennsylvania Reserves. This has always been part of the Reserve Corps. Battery G, 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery, is part of the Pennsylvania Reserves. If you want to find this battery today, it is a combined battery under the command of James Ricketts on Cemetery Hill. This battery actually fights at Gettysburg, but it's got to be consolidated and joins with Battery F of the 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery because there's just not enough people. So this is a unit that's in the Battle of Gettysburg. 2nd Manassas, it's with John Fulton Reynolds, and it is on the south side of the Warrenton Turnpike. If you remember, the Battle of 2nd Manassas was fought August 28th through August 30th, 1862. Much of the heavy fighting is north of the Warrenton Turnpike, and there are few Union troops south of it. And on August 30th, 1862, James Longstreet is going to launch a massive attack against the Union left over on the Confederate right. And once again, the 4th Texas, under now Colonel Carter, but he's not a colonel yet, I think he's major at that time. He'll be the one, or no, I think he is a lieutenant colonel by that time. He'll be the guy in charge of the 4th Texas going forward. There is a colonel of that unit, but he's going to be one of the field officers that's here. So here's the approximate location. This is on a map. So here's the Gainesville Road. You can see where it is, Lewis Lane, Chin Ridge, pretty famous place here today, the Chin House that's here. And this is from 1878. Now, Rick and I called Scott Patchen, who is a historian on the 2nd Manassas battlefield. He wrote a book about this ridge line here and the fight on August 30th, 1862, and we asked him to take Rick and I on a walking tour of this location. You wouldn't know it today if you actually walked this because the location of Kearns' artillery battery, which here is out in the open, today is in the middle of the woods. So unfortunately, the terrain in the battlefield doesn't look anything like it did at the time of the Civil War. Here is a look from Chin Ridge, looking over toward where the Confederates are going to be able to attack. And the Union Army on August 30th, in the late afternoon, folks, they're going to be in serious trouble here when Longstreet launches his assault on the 30th. So here's what it looks like. Here's a map of it. So here's the small little town of Groveton. Here's the Warrenton Turnpike. Most of the Union forces are north of that, as you can see, but General Reynolds, some others are brought over here to the south side of the turnpike, and here you've got Hood's Texas Brigade right here, 4th Texas, going right up against the 4 guns that Mark Kearns has left from the 2 he lost at the Battle of Gaines' Mill. So this time, the Texans assault, and they're going to take most of the possessions that are there. What a heck of a fight. Very, very close fight right on the late afternoon. And this time, Mark Kearns will pay with his life while here with the artillery battery. Now, there's a couple different versions as to how Captain Kearns of the Union Army goes down around these guns. Let's take a look at where this is. Now, here's the path going up to Chin Ridge right here. Let's go back to this map so you can see it again. See it right here? Still there. Today it was sort of like a little road. Today, this is what it looks like. And when Scott Patchen took Rick and I there not long ago, the approximate location on a little hillside out in front of Chin Ridge is right here. It's now in the middle of the woods. So somewhere right here, these 4 guns of Kearns Battery are fighting, and we're standing about where the Texans are, heading toward where that is. This is a very close fight, just like it was at Gaines' Mill. Remember, Truman Seymour said that Captain Kearns is loading the last shots, firing it into the Confederates, and then he's getting the guns off, 4 of them he could take off the battlefield. Same thing happens at 2nd Manassas. One of the Texans says this: the men belonging to the battery abandoned it and made for the rear, leaving only their captain to stand by it. And that he did, with courage and heroism, that although wasted on the impossible, deservedly won the admiration and the sympathy of the foes he was doing his best to destroy. Even when we had come to within 40 yards of the guns, he stood at the only one, loaded it, and was in the act of discharging the piece when he was shot down. Finding himself surrounded by Confederate soldiers of the 4th Texas, Captain Kearns, mortally wounded, remained defiant to the end. Quote, I promised to drive you back or die under my guns, and I have kept my word, end quote. That's how Kearns goes down right here, at least according to one of the Texans. Now, there are very few eyewitnesses to this because an artillery battery in the Civil War has a lot fewer men than an infantry regiment, right? Well, there is the recollection of this man, Abraham Rudisill. Rudisill was a member of Battery G, and he is with it at the Battle of Second Manassas. He claims that Kearns was on foot, shot twice in the leg, then he mounted one of the caissons because Rudisill was a caisson driver. He was a driver for the caissons, which is a chest that you put ammunition in for the artillery. And then he was supposedly shot in the back of the head while leaving. Regardless, he doesn't last very long. It appears that he lived for a few minutes and then he died. Now, the Texans out here on this battlefield are so taken really by his bravery, especially Carter. Carter actually gives up his overcoat to have the body wrapped in and buried. And according to the account that was in the Confederate Veteran, his books were sent back to Kearns' family. That would be Naomi Fisher, his mother, and Reverend Samuel Fisher, his stepfather. And then his spyglass, apparently he had an artillery spotting glass, that was given, according to the Confederate Veteran article, to General Hood. It's there. The Texans made sure that Kearns' body was well taken care of and that it was properly buried on the 2nd Manassas battlefield. That body was buried along Young's Branch. This would be near where it was along the branch. And then I'm sure at that time, of course, you're thinking, Colonel Carter, you're going to take care of this. You're going to try to get word to the family. And then, that's in August of 1862, 11 months later, you're Colonel Benjamin F. Carter. You're here with the 4th Texas in the Battle of Gettysburg. But here you face this battery on 2 battlefields. You took out guns on these battlefields. Now you're here in the Battle of Gettysburg fighting on July 2nd, 1863. Here is a Brady image from Little Round Top looking over toward the Confederate line. And you see how open some of this is. The Texans are going to be right in here, right up against the Slider Lane and right over here where the Bushman Farm is on the far left of the image for July 2nd, 1863. You all know your history. The Union Army was here on July 1st, 1863, fought west and north of town, was defeated, driven back to Cemetery Hill. And on July 2nd, 1863, the Confederates are going to mount attacks both at the left of the Union line, which is down by Little Round Top, and the right of the Union line, which is up at Cemetery Hill and up at Culp's Hill. The Texans are going to be involved with Hood's division because now General John Bell Hood commands the whole division, and the commanding officer of the Texas Brigade is Brigadier General Jerome B. Robertson. And it will be composed of the 1st Texas, 4th Texas, 5th Texas, 3rd Arkansas, here in the Battle of Gettysburg for July 2nd. And that attack is going to take place, ladies and gentlemen, right around 4 o'clock on the 2nd day of the battle. This is stuff that I know that you've all heard before. All right, let's go. Let's take a look at it. This is from the Confederate line. This is about 1900. Shows you how all open that ground is, right? And the Park Service cleared out the ground not too long ago. So here's Devil's Den. Here's the fence lines. Here's the Sharpshooting Monument, the John Slider Farm, Big Round Top. So the Confederates are going to move right here. This would be the attack plane for not only the Texans, but Evander Law, the men that are going to end up going some over Big Round Top, attack Little Round Top. The Texas Brigade gets split in this fight on July 2nd. 2 of the regiments fight in Devil's Den. That's the 3rd Arkansas and the 1st Texas. And Colonel Carter's regiment, 4th Texas and 5th Texas, will fight up against Little Round Top. They'll go over the slope of Big Round Top and assault Little Round Top. This is what it looks like on a map. This is the Cope map. And you can sort of see, this is a map that I did. Here's the John Slider Farm. Here's the triangular field, Devil's Den, Little Round Top, Big Round Top, and Plum Run. Now the accounts we have say that when the attack started, the 4th Texas actually goes down here by the Bushman Farm. Hood, you know, is right near where the center of the line. He's near the 1st Texas when this attack goes off, and he is wounded by a shell fragment on July 2nd, 1863. Here's the Bushman Farm, Slider Farm in the background, big round top, little round top. You've all seen this before. And here's the Cider Lane going down. There's Big Round Top right there. General Hood is probably wounded along this lane right here. We have an account from Jerome Robertson that says that General Hood was wounded as he was crossing 2 stone fences encasing a lane. And where is there a place that could be right in front of General Hood? Right here, right along this lane. Because if you look at the old maps, you'll see another fence that goes right down here. So Hood's probably wounded right here. Obviously, his wounding very critical to Confederate High Command here on July 2nd. Meanwhile, 4th and 5th Texas are going to move across here. Who's shooting at them? The Berdan sharpshooters. There's about 170 men or so of the Berdan sharpshooters that are out in front of the Union forces firing into the Confederate line. Now, here's the Cider Farm today. At the very base of Big Round Top, according to the official records and the accounts that we have, Colonel Carter will be hit in the face and twice in the leg. And some accounts say he was shot in the face. Other accounts say that it was an artillery round that hit him. And that would have been bordering where Plum Run is today. And if you go down here by the Slider Farm, you walk down here, you walk around down where Plum Run actually is, you can still see today where a stone wall was along the base of Big Round Top, right near where Plum Run is. I went walking around out there, and here is part of the wall right here, still there. So somewhere right near here is where Colonel Benjamin Carter of the 4th Texas will be mortally wounded. He'll be taken off the battlefield. He's not in this assault against Little Round Top because he's wounded first. And there are other officers that are wounded very nearby here as well. He probably goes to Hood's Division Hospital, but we don't know that for certain. He's placed in a wagon train, and during the retreat from Gettysburg, when the Confederate Army moves out on the 4th and 5th, he will be one of the wounded soldiers that will go out with the wagon train. Now let's take a look at what this is. Here's an aerial view. I love this because it shows, sort of a, folks, and I get tired, Chris, I get tired of hearing this. If you want to know how great preservation is here at Gettysburg, how great this park is doing, and we're honored to be their partner to help in preservation, look at this 1957 aerial map. Look at all the hotels along the Emmitsburg Road. They're not there. They're all gone today. The guides used to have all their own stands down here on the southern part of the battlefield called Pinch Gut. Used to be down there. Stop and get ice cream or anything you want down there. It's not there anymore. Look at all these things that were in 1957 along the Emmitsburg Road. Preservation has never been better on this battlefield, ladies and gentlemen, since the history of this battle. And it gets better all the time, and you can see it from this slide. Right here's the Bushman Farm. Right down here's the Cider Farm, and right along here is Plum Run. So Colonel Carter, this is where he's wounded. Now, the Army goes out on July 4th and 5th. Remember, Robert E. Lee has some severely wounded people here that he's got to leave here in Gettysburg. There's probably 5,000 Confederates that are left wounded here in the 21,000 total that are left wounded. Armies leave, 21,000 wounded people are left here. Benjamin Carter is not one of them. He is able to get out, get into a wagon, and head out U.S. Route 30, which is the route that the ambulance wagon train took. Remember, the walking troops go out the Hagerstown Pike. The wagon train goes out U.S. Route 30. And Colonel Carter is actually captured in the retreat at the Jeremiah George Farm, south of U.S. Route 30, between New Guilford and New Franklin in Franklin County, the county right next to where you're sitting in, the county right outside that encompasses, I should say, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, as the county seat. Colonel Carter has to be left here. It's probably because he's so badly wounded, he can't go any further on this. Then he ends up, guess where? At the Academy building, Academy U.S. General Hospital in Chambersburg. The same school that Mark Kearns went to school in. Same place, same building that's there. He'll be in Ward 3, bed number 1. This is from his actual compiled military service record, and he will die in that hospital on July 21st, 1863, but not before the people that take care of him are Naomi Kearns, now Fisher, and her husband, the Reverend Dr. Samuel Fisher. These are the people that are going to take care of Mark Kearns while he's over at the Franklin, while he's over in Chambersburg. And this is in the Chambersburg newspaper, written on, or published on July 29th, that talks about him. Now, there are many things in here. It says that Colonel Carter is up for district judge, which is very interesting. His wife and 2 children died while he was in the war. How do they know that? The only way they can know it, right, is if Carter told somebody. That's the only way they're going to know that. So he's talking to people while he's being cared for here. There it says, in the Academy building, right there. His doctor is Abraham H. Sensi. Here's the building in an 1894 map, right here. This building was burned in the Chambersburg fire in 1864. When the Confederates came and burned Chambersburg, it's been added on to. It's a lot different, but this is what it looked like when Colonel Carter is a patient there in 1863, and it's also what it looked like when Captain Kearns went to school there up until 1853. They're 10 years apart in that building, which is interesting. And here is the surgeon, the doctor, I should say, that took care of him, a graduate of Jefferson Medical School over in Philadelphia. This is the man that took care of Colonel Carter. How do we know that? Because it's in the newspaper. That's how we know it. And he's buried over in the Falling Spring Presbyterian Church. Rick was with me. We went over and got this picture over there in Chambersburg. And this is an unpublished image of Reverend Fisher. It comes from the Evangelical Lutheran Church over in Lancaster, from their archives. So Carter's mortally wounded. He's dying. And he's talking to Naomi Kearns Fisher, and he's talking to Samuel Fisher. And here they're helping basically the man that killed this woman's son and stepson. Think about that. Now, Carter knows he's going to die here. Problem is, where's he going to get buried? So thanks to Fisher, Fisher is going to make sure that he actually gets a proper burial in the Methodist cemetery in Chambersburg. And no one wants a Confederate buried in their cemetery. So he's got multiple places he tries to check to get Colonel Carter buried, and no one wants to take the body. But the Methodist Church does. And in 1896, the church is sold to another church. The bodies are dug up. They're reinterred in Cedar Grove Cemetery. We know that from the newspaper. Carter dies on July 21st, 1863. July 21st, 1863. He's buried by Reverend Samuel Fisher and Naomi Kearns Fisher. And then these bodies are taken out of the Methodist Cemetery, put over into Cedar Grove Cemetery. Now, we don't know exactly where Colonel Carter's body is in Cedar Grove Cemetery, but we do know where the bodies that were moved are located, what section in the cemetery they are actually in. And thanks to the group for the Texas Brigade, Colonel Carter gets his own stone in that section today. And if you drive to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania today, you go 30 miles west of Gettysburg to Cedar Grove Cemetery, you will see a stone to Colonel Benjamin Carter of the 4th Texas Infantry Regiment, mortally wounded here at the Battle of Gettysburg on July 2nd, 1863, dying in the same building that his foe, Captain Kearns, that his troop killed and went to school just 10 years earlier. You want to get people interested in the American Civil War, folks, tell a story. Tell many of them. This is something the battlefield guides have known since the beginning, right after this battle, when people came to hear and understand about this battle. When you make the Civil War a human thing, you make it something that people can connect to. And I want to thank all of you for being with me here today to connect to the story of Colonel Benjamin Carter, the 4th Texas Infantry, and Captain Mark Kearns of Battery G, 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery. This is a human experience, and we can't forget that. Thank you. All right. Not bad. I finished pretty good time, Chris.